Welcome back, YouTube, to onzone. I'm your host, Jermon, and today we're taking another look at the 1995 film, Dead Presidents. When we first looked at the film, we covered the coming-of-age story of the main character, Anthony Curtis, and all the decisions that he made that led him up to the Vietnam War. Then we discussed the Vietnam War and how it changed his character to this point where he's returning back to civilization. So, let's get into the breakdown of part 3 of Dead Presidents. The story kicks back off with Anthony just in a cab driving all the way back into the Bronx. And we see Anthony smoking a cigarette, looking around, noticing the changes in the environment, the different styles. It's been 4 years since he's been here. And the last time he was here, it was in the 1960s. Now it's the 1970s. So the whole fashion styles are different. The people are different. Even the environment, like the buildings and stores are shut down. It's a whole different vibe with the Bronx at this time. But as he gets in, he eventually sees his old friend Skip, who's been out of the military for a little while. And first thing he goes up and say, "Hey, straighten up, Marine." But the only response he gets out of Skip is a jitter. You know, Skip's head is down and he's jittering, and we notice at this time what's going on, that he's high off heroin. But before we even get to talk to Skip, we see Cowboy again. Cowboy doesn't realize that he's talking to Anthony at this time, but he offers him some heroin too, because he believes that he might know Skip. Then when he realizes Anthony, he starts giving him respect. "Oh man, I didn't even realize it's you." More respect than he did when he was younger, and he just thought he was just a young cat just in the way. So he gives him his respect and says, "Hey, I'll catch up with you next time." At this point, Skip comes out of his high slumber and realizes that Anthony's back. He's happy to see him, and he decides to walk with him as he gets back home. So as they're traveling back home, Skip basically is the person to kind of lay out the changes, since he's been gone. That Jose, he works at the post office, trying to supply for his family. You also hear about the fact that like Juanita, she's still looking good, and she's taking care of her daughter. But at the same time, we also see that like Skip is also talking about the change in the economy, that due to the changes, you see it's like experience of white flight. Like a lot of white people are leaving the Bronx because of there's a lot of crime that's happening. And then you also see the fact that people are moving to the suburbs, and a lot of businesses are being pulled out. So the economy is being shut down in the Bronx in a bad way across all of the Bronx. So everything is just going downhill. Even with Skip, as we see the Skip, he's on drugs. And Skip even discussed that something got into him when he was overseas.
Man, some shit got into me over there, man.
What?
All I know is my blood cells all fucked up. Some nights I wake up in cold sweats and shit. Don't look at me like that, man. It ain't the heroin. The heroin ain't never did nothing to me. A lot of vets coming down with this shit.
And they don't know what it is.
Which was Agent Orange. And it really did damage to him. And he couldn't really bounce back. So after having this discussion with Skip, Anthony decides to go into his home to meet his parents. And they had some dinner ready for him to eat. But, as I said, due to the decisions that Anthony made, which is getting the military, he has also adapted that lifestyle. So we see Anthony just stuffing down food as fast as possible, because that whole mind state of being on a battlefield. Eat as fast as you can, get that food down, because anything can happen at a drop of a dime. But this makes his mother wary of decisions that he made might have actually harmed him in the long run, because he can't even look at his mother in the face as she tries to talk to him. And she even asks him, how was it overseas? Which was hard for him to respond. And she was just worried that he might have developed some bad habits. As he see with Skip with the drugs. That some people got into drugs. Some people went down even darker paths. But for him, all he says that the only bad habit that he probably learned was some killing for the nation. So he says. But he also picked up drinking and smoking, which is you're gonna see how much that's gonna have an effect later on in the story. So eventually, after having that discussion, he decides to go to Kirby's place. When he gets to Kirby's place, he sees Joe and they reconnect, as like old good friends. But Joe tells him that he really messed up his hand, and it's like it looks scarred up. I think in the story they said he blew off his hand and stuff, that he has a fake hand as a replacement. But he's still ecstatic that the fact that he learned everything about explosives, and he's just real happy that he learned the skill. But that eventually leads to a conversation where they was like, you got to tell Kirby that you're here. So eventually they walk into Kirby's spot, and Kirby is ecstatic to see him, because it's been so long, and that's what I'm saying. It's like a father and son seeing each other again after so many years, and this is where we see that connection that they have. But the real purpose that Anthony came back to Kirby is to find a job. At this time, a lot of veterans came back and didn't have no opportunities of finding a job. People didn't like that, like the war was going on in the first place, and some people, they kind of restricted certain jobs for some of the veterans, so it made it very hard for him to survive. And he was hoping that Kirby was still had, his numbers game running at the time, because Anthony used to be a numbers runner. But Kirby informs him that he had to close it down because the cops that he were paying off was getting too greedy and just was taking more and more and more. And eventually he just got out of the whole game. So since Anthony couldn't find help from Kirby, he decides to go on and find another job that he can pick up. And the first place that he goes to is Sal's Meat. Sal's Meat was a local butcher shop, and Sal accepts him. Like he really accepts him and brings him in, and now he has the opportunity to get some money versus when he first came into the Bronx. Now, at this point, this is when I started to realize why he didn't see his girl or try to see his family, his actual family that he just started 4 years ago. And that's because he wanted to come in with the ability to basically supply for his family. So now we see him go over to Juanita's mom's house to see if she's there. But the first person that opens that door is Delilah. And we see Delilah's transformation. As I said in the first part, that when she was playing James Brown, I'm Black and I'm Proud, how that was going to be a big part because she's now a part of this Black Pride movement. She has the afro, and the whole vibe of her has changed, But she didn't realize that Anthony was coming to the house. So when he asked about Juanita, he was like, she was like, she's going to be back in, and then realize it's Anthony, and invites him in so they can discuss and, catch up. But as they have a discussion, we also see that how the other ways, like politically, she has changed because she talked about communism. And I knew immediately, watching this again, how this is going to be a big problem, because we just had this, we talking about this soldier that fought for, the U.S. side, and now she's talking about communism in the fact of why they should switch over, and why the black people have been really supported and cared with the system they already have. So he was just thrown off by the whole conversation, and he wanted to get away from it immediately. And they do when they start talking about his family and his little girl that he has named Sarah. And coincidentally, Sarah walks in the door with Juanita. All right. Juanita is just so shocked to see Anthony again, to the point where she runs up to him, hugs him, kisses him. And this is where we see them like be like a family for the first time, really a full family, and that connection that they have. And the sad thing about it is, I think this is the last time we're going to see them fully happy in this moment. Because Juanita decides, since you're back, Anthony, let me take you back to my actual home, and you can stay with me, because she wants to be a family again. And that's what they do. They leave Juanita's mom's house and go back to her home. As Anthony and Juanita make it back to her apartment, they have a little discussion in the car and giving each other a kiss, and just how happy they able to see him again. And Anthony even mentions that he hasn't even really responded to Juanita's letters since she gave birth to their daughter, which I feel kind of sad for that. But she doesn't mind at the time. She's just glad that he's back. And as they kiss, the problem rises to their door. The problem for him, I would say. And that is Cutty. Cutty arrives to check on what he says his family. Cutty, who is a local drug dealer, has been taking care of Juanita and Anthony's daughter Sarah since he's been in a war. He's been taking care of her. He's been the father figure. He's been the man of the family, which we see these egos just clash immediately. As Anthony stares him down, he doesn't say a word as Juanita and Cutty talk, but you can really see, how upset Anthony is getting, and even because Cutty is constantly insulting his manhood, as Juanita's telling him, you got to stop spoiling Sarah when he gives her a couple $100. Cutty is like, well, someone had to. And as Juanita's trying to introduce Anthony to Cutty, he just drives off. Doesn't even care. He didn't feel like he's worth the time. He's not a man enough to even have my time. So, after that discussion, they eventually go inside. Anthony's kind of thrown off by the whole situation in the back, but he also realized the living standards that Juanita is living through, because Anthony came from a middle-class family, and now it's like everything's poor. Everything, you have roaches running around, the walls are peeling, and this is the conditions of the time during the 1970s. Everything was going down. Landlords wasn't taking care of the property at all. Sometimes landlords wasn't even abandoning the property, leaving people to suffer with the consequences. And that's why a lot of people end up in abandoned homes during the 1970s in the Bronx, especially in the South Bronx. But Anthony, he starts to consider that I shouldn't leave. And, she is kind of thrown off about this, and she has a feeling that it's about Cutty. And the fact that, you used to mess with him, around with Cutty. And she was like, yeah, I messed around with him. Because Anthony said this before in the first part, that he doesn't want her to be waiting. And she didn't. She found somebody that was willing to take care of the family and be the man of the household. But he eventually decides to stay and kind of push those little concerns to the side because he's back now and he wants to supply for his little girl. You know, he actually wants to be a father figure. Now we get to another flash forward where we see Cowboy, you know, playing pool against Anthony again. All right. We seen it when he was younger. Now we seeing it again. You know, Cowboy is still making mistakes on the pool board, and Anthony's just calm, smoking his cigarette. You know, not even worried about it. So we can tell that Anthony is winning again. But like I told you, like, Cowboy has a big ego when it comes to losing. So he starts to assault Anthony. You know, start talking about how it was stupid for him to join the war and fight that white man's war. You know, that he went over and fought and came back to nothing because the Bronx is going down. You know, there's no opportunities. His benefits is kind of shaky on a lot of things. There's, you know, he's starting back from square one. So he's insulting him on that. And he even gets to the point of even talking about Juanita. And that his boss, Cutty, even slept with her. This angers Anthony to the point where he was going to get his revenge. He starts beating him down with a pool stick just to get his point across. Like, you're not going to disrespect me as you did, like you did when I was a kid. You know, you have a problem with your ego. Here's my ego. And he beats him down. Kirby eventually pulls him off and, you know, tries to not get him to the point of where he was in the war, where he was ready to kill Cowboy, you know, because it's still ingrained in his mind. This is all the things he's learned during the war, you know, and he's almost to that point, but they stopped it there. So we get another jump forward in time where I think about 5 months, where we see Anthony feeding his daughter at the table, and Juanita's pregnant again. That he got Juanita pregnant again and trying to build a bigger family. But we also see Anthony diving deeper into his drug addiction. When I'm saying drug addiction, I'm talking about his drinking habits, you know. And everything's just cool for him, but for Juanita, it's not. Because she's 5 months pregnant. The money that he's bringing into the house is not enough, you know, and she's becoming irritated because he's been making all these promises that he's going to find a better job, but they still end up in the same predicament that they were in. You know, they're still poor, they're still struggling, you know, and this forces him to, like, really think about the path that he needs to go on to make sure that he supports his family fully. So we get another jump scene to Anthony in the car, riding with Kirby and Joe, or Jose as you want to call him. And Jose starts going on explaining this whole idea for this bank heist. That there's this like the Federal Reserve is taking money up to DC and they're gonna burn it, and they have an opportunity to do this bank heist and get some of that money before they do it. Now, you know, Kirby is down for the heist. Anthony at this time, he's not really sure if he wants to fully go through with it. He hears them out, but he's not really sure if this is the right decision at the time. And that could be a reflection on, like, his innocence that he used to have in the past. Because he doesn't want to get caught up and he got a family to take care of. But even though he declined the offer at first, it still gets to him that he can't really supply for his family. And the fact that, you know, he's having these nightmares of, you know, seeing, like, all the dead bodies in war is really affecting his mental health. and it's mixing with his nightmares, with his job as being a butcher, with all the blood and the bodies that he's seeing, is really just creating nightmares for him. He can't even really make love to his girl anymore because he's really thrown off that he can't supply for his family. It's getting the best of him. And he even loses his job at Sal's Meat because, as I said before, the economy is going down and Sal even has to close up his shop. So now he's without a job. But Sal respected Anthony enough to give him some extra food so he can take home to his family, So he takes the food home. He leaves, Now Anthony is lost without a way to find any support. So as Anthony arrives home, he runs into Cutty coming from the direction of his home. This is where things get bad because immediately Anthony is upset. Cutty tries to explain to him that, hey, I visit Juanita, checking on her and checking on Sarah because he considers Sarah his little girl since he's been taking care of her. Just, drop off some money. Anthony's not having it. He don't want none of it, and he's even tells Cutty, stay the fuck away from my family. Cutty responds with, what did you say? You heard me, goddammit. Stay the fuck away from my family. So this throws Cutty off because he's feeling like I should be at least a family friend because I've been here taking care of your family when you didn't. You didn't send money back. You didn't really take care of them while you was at war. I was there. So it throws him off and he feels disrespected. Even though he says, I don't want no trouble. Next thing you know, bam! Knocks him down the stairs. He goes down the stairs. Even Anthony even busts back his head against some of the steel wires that was down there. Cutty comes down there to address them, takes his gun out, and then threatens him to let him know, and even talks down to him about his inability to take care of his family. You can't even put food on your table, and yet you mad at me. And Anthony's like, he's not scared of death. He been in war. Shoot me. If you're gonna shoot me, shoot me. But he cries. I think he cries because he knows that he's lacking as a man. He's lacking the ability to take care of his family. But Cutty tells him, I'm not gonna kill you. Especially not over a woman. This is, you're lucky this is personal. Because if it's business, it'd been different. And he leaves Anthony to deal with his troubles. Anthony eventually makes it back to the house as he's getting healed up by Juanita, but he's not really feeling her. As I said, he's still drinking. He's still knocking down bottles, because he's stressed out. He starts to get mad and says, you're going to have to give that money back. And she says no, because they need the money to cover their basic needs of the house. And he's not going for it. They start getting into a big argument. And when it's really start coming up to the fact that he still feels like she's sleeping with him. And just to make him just to fill up his insecurities, she tells him, yeah, I'm still, if that's what you want to hear, I'm still sleeping with him. And it just goes down the wrong path when she starts insulting his PTSD dreams, his job and his inability. He had enough. He can't take it no more, and decides to choke Juanita at this moment. Now, I don't agree with this at all. When I'm saying this, I'm not agreeing with this action, but we see what led up to this point where he's upset and he's saying, you don't understand what I've been through. You don't understand what I'm going through at this moment. And he decides to leave. You know, he decides to leave Juanita and walk out the door. The next place he decides to go is to Delilah's place, where she's giving a speech, you know, that's trying to empower the people of the neighborhood since they're going through this turmoil of the economy at the time, you know, and talk about what the destruction of the war has done to the people that came back, you know, and the environment. So she's really getting into that speech. But once that speech is done, she ends up going over to a restaurant where he starts to consider that maybe it's probably best that I do this crime of trying to rob this bank truck, because this is the only way I can survive and supply for my family fast enough where they just won't go down in a hole. And as he has this discussion with Delilah, he realized that maybe she would be a good candidate to be added to the roster for this bank heist. So when they actually have the meeting, we have Skip, Kirby, Anthony, Delilah, and they're all sitting there having a discussion on, and Joe, and they're all sitting there just having a discussion on how they're gonna approach this bank heist. You know, how many guards gonna be there, how many people that they need to watch out. So, but at the same time, they start thinking about it that they might need another lookout just in case. They didn't know who, so eventually Anthony decides to bring on someone that they already know, Cleon. He goes to Mount Vernon to see if Cleon will be down to do it. Cleon now is a reverend. He takes up the position of what his dad was a reverend, and he's preaching. And it's like his way of seeking redemption for all the acts that he's committed in the war. Even so, when Anthony tells him about the idea, he immediately jumps on to the whole heist, when he was supposed to be a holy man and he's supposed to be doing better with the decisions that he made. But as I said, this war has transformed people to be to go on darker paths, it seems. Now let's get into the bank heist. All right. So we at the bank heist, everybody's in position. You know, they had painted their face with the white and black, you know, gun set, hiding in wherever they need to be. Right. So you had some people over there, then you had some people on lookout that's watching as, you know, the Federal Reserve bank truck arrives. They're all in position. But the whole plan goes awry when a police officer comes over to Cleon, who's playing a watch out at the time, and starts talking to him and wondering why he's standing on the street corner. He figured that maybe you're waiting for the bus and let me figure out how I can help you, and because you might be here at the wrong time. That's the first part that throws it off, because there's a police officer that's throwing off the plan. The second part happens when they actually bring out the money. The guards bring out the money to the bank truck, and immediately the driver notices, you know, Jose exiting from underneath the stairs and start trying to go and approach him, and they alert him to everybody of an ambush. This is when the guns start firing off, you know, and the battle begins. As the shooting starts to happen, the police officer that's right by Cleon start noticing, and he's going over to respond. This is when Cleon freezes up. As we see in the past, the person that froze up was Skip. Not this time. Skip is the one that actually saved them from even having to deal with the police by killing the police officer before he even reached the whole crime scene. Alright? Also I forgot to mention, you know, before this all even happened, where Skip even kills the police officer, Kirby tries to stop the police officer by shooting at him, but he ends up getting shot in the arm, which kind of puts him down for the whole operation. I mean, he's not dead, but he's not going to be too active for the rest of this heist operation. Eventually, things get worse. Jose is able to plant the bomb on the back of the truck as it speeds off, But at the same time, some more guards come out, and they start shooting at Anthony. Delilah, who, as I said before, still has this love and care for Anthony, tries to defend him and tries to gun down the police officer, but she ends up being gunned down, killing her off. While this is happening, we see the truck, ends up being exploded by like the bomb that Jose had planted. And when it exploded, it didn't just blow off the doors, it actually just exploded and blew up the truck. So most of the money is burning. So this heist is going down bad at this moment. We see Anthony, he's trying to hold on to Delilah, hoping that she survived this, but she's dead,
Put your gun down. Come on, let's get up. Let's go.
Come on, bro. We gotta go, man.
I can't leave her.
You ain't gotta leave her, bro. Cause she's already gone.
Jose, he eventually comes back over after being argued with by, Skip, because Skip is upset that most of the money's been destroyed because of his stupid ideas. And this is when we get to see that even though he learned all these skills at war, the purpose of the skills was to destroy. It wasn't like they weren't made for like bank heists where you have to be more strategic and you have to calculate how big the bomb should be and stuff, because Jose is just thrilled by this, and he goes and tells Anthony about how it worked, like the bomb worked, but Anthony is torn up about Delilah's death. Jose had to bring him out of this and tell him that she's gone. We have to go. So they end up leaving Delilah and just speeding off, running off with the bags in hand, trying to escape. And end up splitting up. Jose decides to go down this alleyway and ends up shooting a cop that's in the car. That cop, he ends up dying and blood squirting out of his neck. But the problem is, Jose doesn't get away. He thought it was going to save him, but the partner of the cop that just got killed, he steers the car and runs Jose down, killing him off too. And that ends the whole heist plan. Everything did not go well. And the money that they had to be split up with only like a fewer amount of people. Skip is upset, that how everything just planned, that their friend is dead. Anthony is still torn up by Delilah. Cleon, he's upset at Skip for killing the cop. And they go back, and Skip and Cleon go back and forth because of who froze up this time. You calling me a junkie, and who froze up this time?
Hold, Anthony. I didn't want nothing to do with a crazy, devil-filled junkie.
What?
You listening to me? Look at him. Oh, shit.
Now say some more shit.
So we still get to see what happens to him after the whole turnout of the heist. And we get to see that Anthony he even dives deeper into his drunken slumber as he tries to deal with all the pain and that he's dealt with his life. We even see Skip, he's still doing heroin. The money wasn't going to be the thing that would save them, and you can see them just going deeper into it. Now Anthony, he tries to have some good faith and buy some toys for the kids in the Bronx, and you can see how bad the Bronx is being because the Bronx is burning at this time. Things being set on fire, buildings are just destroyed. But he gives toys to the kids that need, as just give them support. This also happens with Cleon too. Cleon is giving money out at his church. But giving this money out is causing them to be exposed. So this caused a big problem. And Kirby wants to go out and just kill him. But Anthony decides like, hey, I'm going to go and talk to him to try to cool things down so he won't go too wild with this, you know. Kirby, like as he said, he started to get so worried that like if he gets caught, he's going to snitch on all of us. And sure enough, that's what happens. That when Anthony goes to visit Cleon, he's getting caught by the police and they're taking him in for questioning. And he just starts speaking, telling them about everybody's position. Who was at the heist, what on, what's happening. And that causes the police to go after everybody that was in the group. So when the police goes after Skip, they find that Skip wasn't gonna make it because he had overdosed on some heroin, escaping his fate of going to jail. Now, when I saw this scene, it was kind of scary to see someone overdose on drugs like this, and because like of being caught up in the lifestyle of war and this criminal lifestyle, how damaging it was. Next, we see Anthony and Kirby. They're trying to make their escape. They're gathering up their money, trying to make their way to Mexico so they can escape their fate of going to jail. But it doesn't work out for them either, because the police come busting in and ends up arresting both of them. And we see the disappointment in Anthony's face as he goes down. And I really feel like bad that of like some of the decisions that he made that led him down this path. So we jump forward in time where he's in his court case, and this lawyer is trying to defend Anthony for all his actions, and by using the fact that he was a war veteran and he served his country and he put in a lot of time, hoping that it would give him a lesser sentence. But the problem was that the judge in this case was a veteran too in World War II, and had the idea that had this deal where he was a Marine and Anthony broke all the codes and conduct that it requires to be a Marine. He also says that he was in a real war, World War II, and Vietnam wasn't. This is a common sentiment that a lot of World War II vets had with the veterans of the Vietnam War and stuff, and not really paying attention to the pain that they went through. Like World War II, people revered the veterans that came out of the war. They didn't feel the same way with the war veterans that came out of the Vietnam War, because people were against that war, you know? So they got a lot more pressure, a lot more hatred. And also the fact that the Vietnam War showed us way more of the gritty stuff that happens in war, because we have more cameras on it, you know? But in the aftermath, we see that he is sentenced to 15 years to life. You know, Anthony is upset, disappointed, you know, that he's like, I serve my country and this is all I get. I did all, the only reason I did this because things was getting bad for me, you know, that when I got back, like they were saying earlier, when I got back, there was nothing there for me. And I'm doing this for survival. It's something I didn't want to do, but it doesn't matter. Next thing you know, we see him being put on the bus to be brought to prison. And that's how the story ends for Dead Presidents. I would have to say, like, I now as I get older, I understand the open ending, because we understand what's going to happen to him, you know. And like I said before, it's based on the book's Bloods, which was showcasing the African American experience during the Vietnam War and all the things that they experienced, you know. So it really was kind of like a movie version of a documentary of what people went through and like the actual events that people did at the time and what struggles that they went through. And I think that's why I give it a lot of respect, because it gave me a viewpoint of what's going on. You know, I was worried. Even when I went into the military, I was worried that I might run into similar situations like this if I went to war. If I went to war and I had to go into battles like this, and how much it can affect your mind and how much it can transform you, like your character from who you was before. If you was an innocent and like a self-righteous person, how it can make you savage, you know, how it can make you savage, because, and then try to come back to a civilized world, it's very hard. I know now we have systems in place to help out people and bounce back from their PTSD, but at the time they didn't, you know, and it made me respect the Vietnam vets a lot more, and due to the fact of all the stuff they had to go through and experience, you know. But I will have to say, the fact that it has so much of effect to me, where even a lot of my stories I write today are based on this film, because this film had a big influence on me. I didn't even know at the time it was in the Bronx. The story I'm writing now takes place in the Bronx, the South Bronx. Might take a different viewpoint from it, but now when I look back, I was like, oh, I see the influence where I got some of those ideas. Even though the story didn't really start with that point, I see it now. What influenced me to kind of choose that path, and how big of an impact. So I have to, like, me personally, I have to give it a platinum rating, because it's just that good. Like, it has a big impact, like from the coming of age story to the war part to like even a heist. You know, it's memorable. Like, I can't forget it. It's ingrained in me. And that's even after all these years. It came out in 1995. I was 5 years old when I watched this. You know, I was 5 years old, and now it's ingrained in me, you know, and I enjoy it. But I hope you like this whole breakdown and review of Dead Presidents. And if you'd like to see more, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button, because I'll be pushing out more real soon. All right? But until next time, peace.
Ain't nothing I say gonna get me out of this. But things were getting bad for me, and I had to do what I had to do to survive.